Her family secretly mocked me in Chinese. Then I exposed them in my wedding speech. When I first met Lin's family, they had no idea I understood Mandarin. Neither did she. I figured I'd surprise them one day, maybe give a heartfelt toast in their language at dinner. But the moment her mother laid eyes on me, that plan changed completely. She let out an audible gasp and turned to her husband, exclaiming in Mandarin, "He's actually black." Then turned to Lin and asked with a fake smile, "Why are you like this?" That moment told me everything. From then on, I decided to keep quiet about speaking Mandarin. I wanted to know what they really thought. It turned out, they had a lot to say. That first dinner was brutal. They continuously pressured Lin to leave me, calling me untrustworthy, a serial cheater, making pointed remarks about my skin color, all in Mandarin, assuming I couldn't understand. I kept a calm face, smiled, and thanked them for dinner, while inside, I made a decision. I'd never let on that I knew what they were saying. That secret became my shield and, eventually, my weapon. As Lin and I got more serious, things went from bad to outright malicious. At her cousin's wedding, we were lining up for family photos when her mom slipped in next to me. She accidentally dug her stiletto into my foot. I didn't flinch. As she pressed harder, she told her sister in Mandarin that black men were always angry, and I'd lash out eventually. Then Lin would see the real me. I just smiled for the camera like nothing was happening. And that wasn't the only time. They pulled petty stunts here and there, each one darker than the last. One night after dinner, her mom offered to clean up. My phone was on the counter. Lin was in the bathroom. She accidentally dropped it in a sink full of soapy water. No apology. At a summer barbecue, her dad offered me a fancy imported beer, saying it was to celebrate something at work. I heard them clearly. He had spiked it with sleeping pills. They said in Mandarin it should knock me out in 20 minutes. I smiled, took the beer, walked behind a tree, and spit it out. It got worse. At her grandmother's birthday, I was helping with dinner service. Her dad whispered to her mom that the soup I was carrying was piping hot. She turned, stumbled into me on cue, and poured the entire pot of boiling soup down my back. The pain was unimaginable. My shirt fused to my skin. I dropped to the floor. Her mom burst into crocodile tears, apologizing dramatically as if it was a genuine accident. She even called the ambulance herself. 4 days later, we got the hospital bill mailed directly to our house. The night before my bar exam, after 3 grueling years of law school, they reached a new low. Lin had left her laptop at their house. They logged in and deleted my exam registration. I found out at 3 a.m. and spent the next 4 hours on the phone trying to get emergency reinstatement. Meanwhile, they sat in the living room laughing about how I'd wasted years of my life. The next morning, they texted Lin saying they saw me out partying at a bar instead of at the test. I passed that exam, but that was the first time I genuinely considered walking away. But the final straw came just days before the wedding. At dinner, while Lin was in the restroom, they began casually chatting about how they were paying a woman $50,000 to crash our wedding and accuse me of assault. Her mom showed her dad photos of the actress in fake bruises and makeup. They even toasted to it, smiling and laughing, thinking they'd finally found a way to tear us apart. On our wedding day, during the final breakfast with family, they reviewed the plan one more time. Her dad confirmed the woman was in position, showed her mom the photo, and said it was all set. Then they looked at me with grins on their faces and asked if I was excited for the big day. That was it. That was the moment I decided it was time to speak up. Time to give my gift. Before the ceremony, I asked everyone to gather. Friends, family, cousins, everyone. I raised a glass and said I had something important to share. Lin's parents looked mildly puzzled but curious. Then I locked eyes with them and began speaking, in fluent, native-level Mandarin. Every guest turned in shock. I saw the blood drain from her parents' faces instantly. Her mom froze like she'd seen a ghost. Her dad turned sheet white. You could feel the air get sucked out of the room. I started by thanking them for welcoming me into the family. I told the guests how for the last couple years, I'd been lucky enough to hear all the honest thoughts her parents had shared behind my back. I never told them I understood everything, because I didn't want to ruin the opportunity to hear what they truly thought of me. The room fell silent. Her parents were visibly shaking. I kept going. I praised their hospitality, their kindness, and warmth. I thanked her mom for always being so gentle with my belongings, and her dad for watching over my safety. I nodded to their enthusiasm for our wedding plans and how supportive they'd been. The room exploded with applause and laughter. Her parents looked like they wanted to crawl under a table. I silenced the room once more and added, "One more thing." I told them that earlier that morning, my father called to give us a wedding gift. He was transferring one of the estates in his portfolio into mine and Lynn's name, a home of our own. But there was something else, too. I looked her parents dead in the eyes. I said I'd told him everything they'd done to me. And in response, he wanted to send them a gift as well. Something that should arrive sometime during the wedding. I smiled. The guests applauded again. That was when I noticed her mom twitching. Literally twitching. Her fingers spasmed in the way they used to when her old nerve disorder flared up. A condition that hadn't reappeared in years. I saw a small wet spot appear on her dress. She was so scared she'd literally peed herself. Her dad stood frozen. The performance had finally collapsed. Later, after the ceremony, her father came to me. Voice trembling, face pale, he muttered, "We need to talk. Outside. Now." But I just stood there, finally feeling the peace I had waited years for. My whole life, I was told not to be selfish. I grew up giving everything to others just to be seen as good enough. When I was 9, I ran a yard sale by myself and sold all my favorite toys, birthday presents, Christmas gifts. I made close to $100. At dinner, I proudly told my family. My mom didn't congratulate me. She just asked, "How much are you giving to your brother?" He was a year younger than me. I hesitated. She stared. So, I gave him $20. He looked at her, not me, just waiting. So, I gave him $80. He never said thanks. She just nodded like that was how it was supposed to be. Now I'm 27. For the first time, I have savings, a retirement plan, financial stability. That might not sound like much, but after struggling with spending habits, it's everything. So, at a family gathering, I came with good news. A real estate expert I worked with had an opportunity. He needed someone to invest in a property to flip for Airbnb. It would generate steady passive income. I could have taken it, but instead, I wanted to offer it to my brother, Trent. All the way to my mom's, I kept telling myself, "This proves you're not selfish anymore." But when I arrived, Trent opened the door and immediately said, "Did Mom tell you my laptop broke? Maggie was supposed to get me a new MacBook." Before I could even reply, my mom walked in behind him with crossed arms and told me, "If you're going to be selfish and not buy your brother new things, you don't deserve any of what you have." I didn't even get to tell them about the investment opportunity, how it could have made him $5,000 a year. Instead, Trent interrupted again. "Maggie, I protected you. Remember the bullies?" Oh, I remembered. He brought it up every time. One time in high school, he told some bullies to back off. They did. But I paid for that favor every day after. Every family moment since then, he made sure I remembered. But standing there that day, I finally saw it clearly. Some people only love what they can take from you. And others? They're just waiting for the moment you realize you owe them nothing. It only took a single day, but Trent wouldn't stop bragging about it, acting like he'd survived a war or led an army. He talked about it endlessly, exaggerating like he'd been some kind of champion. I know it sounds silly, but I didn't even get mad. I just felt this deep sting in my chest, like tears threatening to spill. My fingers brushed the new iPhone still tucked in my coat pocket, a gift I'd bought for my mom. I was about to hand it over, thinking maybe this would finally bring us closer, but then they opened their mouths again. They pivoted to Trent losing his job. "Your brother just got fired from the convenience store. 10 years wasted," my mom sighed. Then she turned to me with that expectant tone. "So, what's your plan to support us now?" In that instant, the sorrow evaporated. It was rage. Pure and cold. I looked at their smug, expectant faces and realized, not once had they even invited me inside. I thought about friends' families, how they welcomed them home with open arms, kindness, laughter. How none of them had to walk on eggshells or be made to feel like an ungrateful servant. I took a deep breath and asked if they had brought anything for me. A birthday card? A token gesture? My brother rolled his eyes. Always about you, her Maggie. He left and returned moments later with my gift, a coupon for a milkshake. From Burger King. I'm lactose intolerant. That was the final straw. I put the phone back in my pocket and turned to walk away. As I rounded the corner to my car, I finally let go. I sobbed. All the years of bending to their guilt, sacrificing for their needs, putting myself last, I felt it all at once. And for the first time, I let myself be angry. And then, I acted on it. I spun my car around, left the wrapped iPhone on the passenger seat, and marched back up to their house. Trent opened the door and sneered, "Glad you're done with your little meltdown. Now, where's the—" I cut him off. "Hey, Trent. Who pays your phone bill?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Mom's boyfriend. Duh." I kept going. "And your gas? Health insurance? Food delivery on weekends? That fancy coffee subscription?" His face darkened. That smirk vanished. Then my mom appeared behind him. "Hey Mom," I said. "Who pays the rent on this house? The car insurance?" They turned toward each other, eyes wide with realization. I had made sure each of them believed the other was paying for their lives. I had lied to keep the peace, to protect them from their own resentment. And now the web had snapped. I didn't explain. I just turned and walked away. It felt powerful, but also painful. That night, I curled up and cried. Not because I regretted it, but because cutting the cord hurts. I woke up to a phone vibrating non-stop. Missed calls. Voicemails. The first few were full of fury, threats. By the 10th, they were pleading, begging me to be reasonable. I deleted the voicemails and scrolled through the texts. Pages of accusations. Trent accusing me of being selfish. Mom blaming me for destroying the family. Then came the social media notifications. Dozens at once. Trent had posted a photo of us as kids, captioned with a sob story about how I abandoned them when they needed me most. Comments poured in from strangers. My phone lit up with 47 missed calls, 83 texts. I silenced it and let the chaos unfold. Then I got a message from Sarah. She asked if I was okay. Apparently, my mother had messaged her, telling her I'd had some kind of mental breakdown. That thinly veiled manipulation disguised as concern turned my stomach. I opened my laptop and started backing everything up. Screenshots of the messages, the lies, the guilt trips. Every threat, every passive-aggressive line. I backed them all up to the cloud. Then I saw something that made my heart drop. LinkedIn notifications. Trent had already reached out to 3 of my colleagues. That crossed a line. My phone buzzed again. Sarah was calling. I answered. She sounded puzzled, telling me about the message from my mom about my condition. I realized I needed to get ahead of this, before the narrative spun too far. I invited her over and laid it all out. I showed her the bank records, the receipts, the digital paper trail proving I'd supported them for years. Rent, bills, groceries, little indulgences, itemized and dated. Sarah's face changed from confusion to fury as she saw the full scope. She warned me that my mom had already started spreading her version to other friends. It wasn't just damage control anymore. It was sabotage. Then I saw the alert from my banking app. Someone was trying to reset the password on an old joint checking account. The one we opened when I was a teenager. My blood ran cold. I bolted to the car and raced to the bank. When I arrived, my mother was already there, pleading with a bank manager. She was telling him I wasn't well and couldn't manage my finances anymore. The manager recognized me. We'd spoken before. He listened patiently as I presented my ID and account details. My mom was still crying, trying to claim I was mentally unfit. I kept my voice even and calm. After I confirmed my identity, he helped me freeze the account and removed her access. Her demeanor flipped. She turned to the other customers, sobbing about how her daughter was unraveling and leaving her poor, unemployed son out in the cold. I spent the next hour resetting every password, adding layers of protection to every single account. While I was updating my email recovery settings, I discovered she'd been logging into my old email, the one I'd used in high school. The next morning, I pulled into work and saw Trent standing next to my reserved spot. He stood straight when he saw me, pretending to be calm. "Can we just talk like adults?" I didn't even get out. I locked my doors and called security. He left before they arrived, but the message was loud and clear. They knew where I worked. Later, Jake met me for lunch. I tried to explain what was going on. He didn't fully understand, and said maybe I shouldn't let money get in the way of family. I didn't argue. I just pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the files. Bank statements, years of texts. While organizing the documentation, I stumbled on something ancient. A message from when I was 16. My mom had promised to pay me back for helping cover Trent's car insurance. That had been just this once. 11 years ago. Things escalated further. My mom started messaging my coworkers on Facebook, spinning her version of the story. 3 colleagues approached me privately. My boss pulled me aside, concerned about the family emergency my mother had described in graphic detail. I explained with just enough proof to make my case without oversharing. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go. I called Emma, an old friend and therapist. I thought she'd understand. Instead, she brushed me off. "Your mom was always so kind to me growing up." That stung more than I expected. That night, I created a spreadsheet. 5 years of support, down to the dollar. $47,000. Every Venmo transfer, every Cash App transaction, every check, every grocery run. All logged. As I reviewed the records, I stumbled across something that stopped me cold. A credit card bill I'd once been CC'd on. Last month, my mom had bought a brand new MacBook Pro. The same month she told me they couldn't afford food. She'd bought the laptop Trent wanted, and made me the villain for not gifting it to him. Jake came over again that night. I showed him everything. His face turned pale. He apologized for minimizing things before. He'd even received a call from one of his relatives. My mother had told them she was worried about my mental state. The lie had spread far and wide. And now the pattern was undeniable. Create a crisis. Demand rescue. Play the victim when refused. Over and over for years. I got a message from Aunt Patricia. A surprise. We rarely talked. She'd been hearing conflicting stories and wanted to know the truth. We met for coffee. I showed her the records. The spreadsheets. The screenshots. Her expression hardened. For the first time, someone in the family truly understood. Patricia started speaking up at family events, pointing out inconsistencies, asking questions no one had asked before. A message from Marcus, one of my cousins, arrived soon after. "Did you really pay their rent for 3 years?" I replied with a simple yes, attaching the bank statements. Within minutes, he'd shared them with the rest of the family. Then Trent hit back harder than ever. He made a GoFundMe campaign titled "Help My Mom and Me Avoid Homelessness." The main photo? Us as kids. Me pushing him on a swing. The description accused me of abandoning them during their darkest time. The campaign had already been blasted across social media. They weren't just telling lies, they were turning the public against me, using sympathy to force me back into their grasp. That same day, Sarah's husband, Tom, called. He'd seen Trent at the casino the previous week. At the high-stakes table, betting hundreds at a time. He took a photo because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And neither could I. The timestamp revealed something jarring. It was from 3 days after Trent had claimed he was completely out of money. As I tried to absorb this, my grandmother gave me a call. She had heard 3 conflicting accounts, one from my mother, another from Trent, and a third from Aunt Patricia. None of them matched. She wanted to hear my version directly. I drove to her house, bringing with me a folder packed with receipts, records, and years of evidence. Sitting in her kitchen, I laid it all out. Bank transfers, digital payments, messages, everything. Her aged hands trembled as she flipped through the paperwork. She asked me to play the voicemails I'd saved. My mother's voice was a study in manipulation, telling others I was unstable while privately accusing me of being heartless. Her tone shifted depending on who she thought was listening. The next evening, a knock at my door made my pulse spike. Through the peephole, I spotted 2 uniformed officers. They said a family member had requested a wellness check. I let them in, gave them my ID, and calmly explained the situation. After taking brief notes and confirming I was in no danger, they left. It wasn't just a wellness check. It was another tactic. My mother was raising the stakes. Jake's family started noticing, too. His mom recalled comments my mother had made at dinners, always talking about how generous I was, but in a weirdly territorial way, not grateful. The realization began to ripple through our social circles. Then I received a Facebook message from someone I didn't recognize. It was from a former coworker of Trent's at the convenience store. He said Trent hadn't been let go recently. He'd been fired 3 months ago. Seeing the GoFundMe campaign had rubbed him the wrong way. More people started coming forward. A neighbor from years ago told me my mom once borrowed $500 from her, supposedly for my college needs. She found it suspicious since she knew I'd gotten a full ride, but kept it to herself, until now. I kept my tone steady and respectful when relatives reached out, sticking to verifiable facts. Many noted how different that was compared to my mother's frantic, emotion-laced messages. Her dramatics were starting to unravel. The first of the month loomed on my calendar, circled in red, rent day, bill day. I could feel the pressure building. Something was coming. Sure enough, just before the due date, I received a DM from Trent's ex. She shared old chats where he described me as jealous and manipulative, claiming I might someday invent stories about the family. He'd been laying groundwork for this for years. At a cousin's barbecue, things took another turn. My mom showed up uninvited, already crying. Someone casually asked how Trent's job search was going, and that triggered a full breakdown. She got caught in her own contradictions, unable to remember when he'd supposedly lost his job. Then, like clockwork, she offered a deal. If I just paid for 1 more month, she'd let it all go. The same lie I'd heard countless times before. Within an hour of that event, 3 family members reached out, each saying something similar: Mom's story doesn't make sense anymore. While organizing my documents for tax season, something new surfaced. My accountant noticed that I was still being claimed as a dependent on my mother's tax returns, something I had never authorized. His tone shifted immediately. It could be considered fraud. I sat with that information, unsure how to move forward. Meanwhile, Trent's fundraiser stalled at $200, mostly from a couple of distant relatives who hadn't heard what was really going on. Trent began posting more aggressively, pleading for donations. Then, out of the blue, my mom's now ex-boyfriend messaged me. He revealed that he'd been giving her over $1,000 a month to help with expenses. He had no idea she was also taking money from me. She'd been living large on both ends. Sarah refused to let me isolate myself. She threw a girls' night at her house. A dozen women showed up, each with their own story of toxic relatives. We talked for hours. Their solidarity reminded me that I wasn't alone. Jake also reflected on how he initially dismissed my concerns. He began recognizing his own enabling behavior and made real efforts to support me better. Our bond grew stronger as he shifted from passive observer to active ally. I decided not to use the tax fraud as leverage. As tempting as it was, I didn't want to stoop to their level. There were lines I refused to cross. Then came an odd moment of confirmation. I was shopping at Target and turned a corner to find Trent in the electronics aisle. His cart was loaded: video games, expensive booze, luxury snacks. He saw me and immediately launched into a spiel about job applications and financial hardship. But the lies were right there in his cart. Later, Aunt Patricia confirmed my suspicions. Last year, Trent had conned her into covering his car repairs. He had told her he was desperate. Apparently, he was running the same story on everyone. 2 cousins also came forward, saying they had stopped attending family events to avoid being pressured for money. They thought they were alone, not realizing others were going through the same thing. Isolation had been part of the strategy. Messages from a family group chat began to reveal the truth. Everyone had been comparing notes on the stories they'd been told. Patterns emerged. The illusion of harmony fell apart. Even my boss noticed something was off. She discreetly offered counseling services through work. She'd been through something similar herself and picked up on the emotional signs. I ran into my mom at the grocery store. She cornered me, saying that while Trent had some issues, I should still help him. Family helps family, she said, using the same circular logic that had kept me chained for years. Members of her church also began to contact me. Apparently, she'd been giving conflicting prayer requests, saying one week that I was mentally ill, the next week that I was ungrateful and cruel. They were starting to see through her contradictions. Then her ex-boyfriend sent me a message from their landlord. Rent was late again. Their financial web was crumbling. They had relied on so many overlapping streams of support, and now most were drying up. Marcus, my cousin, called with a disturbing discovery. 2 years ago, Trent had borrowed money from him to buy me a birthday present. I never received one. He'd even stolen money meant for me. Jake's sister called, too. She was dealing with her own family issues and asked how I'd handled boundaries. I found myself giving advice, sharing techniques I'd only recently learned. Growth was happening. Quietly, behind the scenes, 5 family members created a separate group chat, without my mother or Trent. They wanted a space to talk honestly and compare experiences. It was the first time in years I felt genuine support from blood relatives. Then something unexpected happened. Trent's emotional guilt trips on social media began to unravel. People noticed inconsistencies. In one post, he lamented poverty. In another, he wore $200 sneakers. His new gaming rig sat visible in the background. The lies became too obvious to ignore. At Sunday dinner with Grandma, the turning point came. Trent grumbled about being broke but rejected every job idea thrown at him. He said the hours were bad, or the work was beneath him. Grandma, for the first time, saw it. She sat silently and watched him dig his own grave. Tom, a mutual friend, overheard some chatter at the convenience store where Trent had worked. Apparently, Trent had been let go for stealing lottery tickets. Tom decided to ask the manager directly, his next-door neighbor. The manager confirmed it. Trent hadn't been laid off. He'd been caught stealing. With rent due the next day, my mother's calls became frantic. She was in true panic now. Every cousin got the same call, the same sad story. But now, the cracks in her web of lies were fully visible. She had been taking money from all of us while claiming poverty. I debated whether to confront her ex-boyfriend with all the financial deceit. Eventually, I chose the simplest route. I texted him screenshots, bank records, cash apps, rent payments. The numbers told the story better than I could. Slowly, family members began blocking her calls. The guilt trips no longer worked. Her tactics had been exposed to too many people. Aunt Patricia decided to hold a family meeting. She didn't invite my mom or Trent. She wanted us to talk freely, without chaos. At her house, we all shared stories. Lies we'd been told. Manipulations we'd fallen for. The unity in that room gave me something I hadn't had in years, validation. Then my mom played her most dramatic card. She faked a medical emergency, dialed 911 and claimed to be having chest pains. The paramedics found nothing wrong. Neighbors saw it all. Her last resort was pity, but it backfired. Her ex-boyfriend broke up with her after learning the full truth. That shut off another income source. Bit by bit, every support system she had exploited began crumbling. My co-workers gathered around me, many sharing their own stories. I wasn't alone in this. Then someone posted an old photo in the family chat, our high school yearbook pictures. It showed the truth better than anything. Trent in designer clothes, polished and perfect. Me beside him in worn-out hand-me-downs. The image said everything. The photographic proof revealed a story that had been unfolding for years, decades, even. At the family meeting hosted by Aunt Patricia, I shared the complete financial timeline. Charts, statements, years of records ordered by date, each one contributing to the bigger picture. Even the skeptical relatives had nothing to say as they processed the depth of what had happened. My grandmother finally spoke, revealing that my mother had done the same thing to her own siblings in their younger years. It wasn't new, it was inherited behavior, passed down and polished over generations. The atmosphere in the room shifted. More family members pulled out old photo albums. Every snapshot told the same tale. Trent dressed in the latest fashion, surrounded by new toys, while I stood off to the side in clothes worn thin from use. The favoritism had always been there, visible to anyone who chose to look. A decision was made that day. As a family, we agreed it was time to stop supporting their behavior. We set firm boundaries and made pacts to help each other stick to them. No more isolating guilt, no more being picked off one by one. We built a new structure of accountability, check-ins before giving money, honesty in conversations, solidarity in boundaries. The moment I feared came on a Thursday night. My mother showed up with Trent at my door, knocking loudly. I could see her through the peephole, tears, shouting threats, making sure the entire hallway could hear her desperation. She said she'd sue, screamed that she'd expose me unless I agreed to help. I didn't engage. I picked up the phone and called the police, reporting a threat and asking for a wellness check. I refused to answer the door. When officers arrived, she put on her usual performance, but they quickly saw she was physically fine, just emotionally charged. Some relatives heard about the confrontation and started to waver. A few thought I should offer help, just one more time. That's how it always started, just once. I had to stay strong, even when I could feel the pressure breaking through old cracks. It took every bit of resolve I had to stay on course while watching others slip back into familiar roles. The loneliness returned, but this time, it was a protective barrier I had created for myself. I made the hard call to cut them off entirely. I blocked every number, deactivated every social media connection, and filtered emails. The silence afterward felt strange, both eerie and peaceful. With no access to me, my mother and Trent redirected their focus to others, especially those who had been at the meeting. They began recycling the same tactics, guilt-tripping, begging, twisting the story to gain sympathy. But the family now saw the signs. They weren't so easy to fool anymore. The very next morning, I received an unexpected phone call. My grandmother wanted a family meeting at her house and specifically asked me to attend. Her tone told me this wasn't routine. Something had shifted. When I arrived, almost everyone was already seated. My grandmother sat with a folder in her lap, her expression serious. She waited until the room quieted, then opened it and began passing out documents. Old bank records, scribbled IOUs, bounced checks. They dated back over 30 years. My mother had borrowed thousands from her siblings under false pretension. A hospital bill here, a tuition fee there, none of them real. My uncle Nathan, who had always been distant, finally explained why. He once lent my mother money for my medical treatment when I was a child, only to find out I was never sick. Each relative had their own version of the same story. Emergencies that never happened, loans never returned, excuses layered with guilt. Then my grandmother dropped the biggest revelation. After the previous week's threat at my door, she had quietly hired a private investigator. What he uncovered was worse than any of us had expected. My mother had opened credit cards in my grandmother's name years ago, racking up debt. This wasn't just manipulation, it was identity theft. My grandmother had already spoken with a lawyer. The decision was unanimous. The family would support legal action. 3 days later, Thanksgiving arrived. My mother and Trent, as usual, walked into my grandmother's house uninvited, expecting a warm meal and a fresh audience. Instead, they found a united front. My mother immediately accused me of turning everyone against her, and Trent demanded repayment for his so-called protection over the years. But this time, no one listened. As his frustration grew, Trent slipped up. He admitted that the money my mother gave him for a MacBook had been spent on a gaming console. That moment of honesty destroyed what little credibility they had left. My grandmother stood up, her presence commanding, and told them to leave. My mother tried her tears again, but my grandmother didn't budge. She pointed to the door. They hesitated, and that's when my mother turned to me and said I'd regret this when she was gone. A threat wrapped in self-pity. I calmly pulled out my phone, turned on the speaker, and began dialing 911. That was enough. She grabbed Trent and left before I could even finish the call. The rest of Thanksgiving was a mix of relief and emotional recovery. More stories came out. Textbooks I supposedly needed money for but had already purchased myself. Surgeries for Trent that never existed. The scale of deceit was breathtaking. My phone stayed quiet. The absence of calls and messages was its own kind of peace. But I knew they hadn't truly stopped. They pivoted again. Marcus got a phone call. My mother claimed they'd be homeless by morning. Patricia received a desperate message about Trent needing an urgent medical procedure. Nathan was told they were living out of a car. The desperation intensified, but the family was ready. Our group chat buzzed with updates, warnings, support. Each lie was documented, shared, and dismissed. When the eviction notice came, no one was surprised. With no one left to scam, they faced real consequences. They tried to frame it online as abandonment. Posts filled with pleas for help and blame toward the family. But the internet has a memory. Old friends, exes, former co-workers chimed in. People they had burned over the years shared their own stories. Trent's theft at Quick Check became public knowledge. Their narrative crumbled. I observed from afar as their constructed reality finally caved in. No more sympathetic relatives. No more handouts. No more financial lifelines. Their circumstances were the sum of their own choices. My mother made one last attempt to reach me through my job, sending an email filled with contradictions. Love, threats, pity, blame. I forwarded it to HR and requested a new work address. Jake and I started couples counseling to address how the entire ordeal had impacted us. He acknowledged how dismissive he'd been at first and committed to truly listening. That work brought us closer. He became my greatest supporter. The family found its rhythm again. Patricia hosted monthly gatherings that felt genuine, without tension or manipulation. There were no whispered concerns about money, no walking on eggshells. The change was noticeable. 3 months went by. Word reached me through the grapevine. My mother and Trent had moved to a new town, where they had found a fresh church congregation, likely unaware of their past. The behavior hadn't changed, only the targets. Meanwhile, the fraud case advanced. The prosecutor felt confident. My mother might face real jail time. This seemed to shake her more than losing the family had. I used the money I'd saved by not supporting them and finally invested in the airborne partnership I'd been eyeing. My colleague was thrilled to have me join, and within a few months, it was generating passive income. The success wasn't flashy. It was quiet, steady, healing. I had created something for myself, free from guilt or strings. Therapy helped me confront the mental scars, feeling selfish for saying no, anxious when treating myself, carrying guilt for boundaries I had every right to set. Slowly, through sessions, I reclaimed my voice. 6 months after cutting ties, I changed my phone number. Only those I trusted received it. It was a clean slate. I later learned my mother had been arrested. She spent a few nights in jail before someone, no one from the family, bailed her out. Trent responded by ranting online, but his posts fell flat. Even his followers had grown tired of the drama. The airborne continued to flourish. My first payout arrived, small, but completely mine. I deposited it with a quiet kind of pride. It was the payoff of years of struggle, made sweeter by knowing I'd done it on my own. My circle grew stronger. Jake, Sarah, cousins, co-workers. People who celebrated my joy and supported my pain. This was what real family felt like. One day, I bumped into someone from high school. They'd seen Trent recently, working at a gas station, still angry at the world, still waiting for someone else to fix his life. Nothing had changed. I felt nothing but distance. The restraining order I'd filed after the incident at my apartment had given me the protection I needed, and the closure I never expected. My mother had broken the order twice, each incident bringing harsher consequences. What blood ties failed to protect, the law enforced clearly, with structure and consequences that couldn't be ignored. That clarity gave me something I'd never experienced from my family: safety. As my success with Airborne grew, new doors opened. My boss, having witnessed the grace and strength with which I handled my family's unraveling, rewarded me with a promotion. Life began to move in ways I hadn't thought possible when I was still anchored by guilt, obligation, and emotional blackmail. On my 28th birthday, I was surrounded by people who celebrated me without hidden motives or unspoken debts. No passive-aggressive remarks, no dramatic scenes, just honest joy and love. The stark contrast between this and the birthdays of my past made it all the more meaningful. Aunt Patricia's monthly family meetings had turned into a new kind of tradition. With the negativity removed, we finally discovered what it meant to be a true family. One based on honesty, compassion, and mutual respect. My mother's legal troubles deepened. Investigators unearthed evidence that she had been falsely listing me as a dependent on her taxes for years. The IRS opened a case. The consequences she had managed to sidestep for decades hit her all at once. With my growing financial security, I helped cousin Marcus start his own business, a properly documented loan with clear repayment terms. It felt good to support someone without being drained, to give without being manipulated. Marcus thrived with the structure and support, something I'd never been offered when my money was being siphoned without consent. The last attempt my mother made to contact me came in the form of a letter from an attorney. She wanted me to withdraw the fraud charges, invoking family loyalty as a reason. I didn't reply. Even the lawyer's tone implied he understood my silence. 1 year after the confrontation at my apartment door, I stood in my own home, purchased with money I had earned, titled in my name, free from strings. The Airbnb project had accelerated my goals. I had achieved what they said I didn't deserve. 8 months later, my grandmother passed peacefully. At her funeral, my mother and Trent tried to attend but were turned away at the door. The family stood united in honoring her wishes. Toxic presences were not welcome, not even in grief. Her will was airtight. She had planned everything meticulously. Each grandchild received an equal portion, except my mother, who received $1 symbolic and a note referencing all the money she'd stolen over the years. I invested my share into a second rental property. The passive income grew steadily. Financial freedom began to feel normal. My mother was placed on probation and ordered to repay thousands. Trent, furious at the outcome, took to social media, but the audience had moved on. No one cared. Their tale of victimhood no longer captivated anyone. Therapy peeled back more layers. I learned to spot manipulation instantly. I learned to trust my own judgment and give myself permission to say no. Healing wasn't a straight path, but every step forward mattered. 2 years later, Jake and I were married in a quiet ceremony surrounded by people who truly cared. My mother and Trent weren't invited. Their absence was liberating. For the first time, love came without a price tag. The wedding gifts went toward our dreams, not someone else's drama. Every part of that day was ours. No interference. No shadows. I heard they'd moved again. Burned through the patience of another unsuspecting church community. The same games, the same desperation, just different targets. Meanwhile, Jake teased me about my Airbnb empire. We now owned 5 properties. I hired my first employee. The same business I'd once tried to offer Trent had become the vehicle to my independence. The irony was sharp. I could now help others without depleting myself. I mentored young women who were navigating their own escapes from financially abusive families. They saw themselves in my story, and I helped them create their own paths forward. 3 years after cutting all ties, the fear and guilt had finally faded. I no longer jumped when the phone rang. The anxiety that once followed me like a shadow had dissolved. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. My mother had aged quickly. Online photos showed someone bitter, angry, drained by the weight of her own choices. Trent hadn't changed. Still blaming the world, still seeking pity. Their behavior had become an unspoken warning in the family, a lesson passed down through stories told quietly at gatherings. The investments kept growing. What they once took from me, I now poured into something sustainable, something mine. Every rent payment they stole had become bricks in the foundation of my wealth. I wrote an article about financial abuse within families. The response overwhelmed me. Thousands of people reached out, sharing similar pain. I realized I had never been alone. There were countless others reclaiming their lives, just like I had. Real family, chosen or blood, supported me without wanting anything in return. They toasted my wins, lent hands when I needed help, stood beside me through setbacks. This was what love looked like, unconditional, without debt. Reunions at Aunt Patricia's grew larger. Family members who had once kept their distance now felt safe enough to come back. Without my mother's manipulations, space opened for honest connection. We were all healing together, finally able to name what we had survived. 5 years after the doorstep confrontation, I achieved full financial independence. My rental income covered everything. Work became a choice, not a necessity. The life I had once imagined for Trent, the opportunity one had offered in good faith, had become my own lived reality. I kept the spreadsheet detailing the $47,000 I'd given them, not out of resentment, but as a reminder. Every dollar was a lesson. Each transaction had brought me closer to this freedom. The cost of the worst education I'd ever received. They faded from relevance. Occasionally, I'd hear updates, another eviction, another broken promise, another failed lie. They were no longer part of my life, just background noise. The girl who used to sell her toys for scraps of approval had grown into a woman who knew exactly what she was worth. That journey, from exploited to empowered, had been built on hard boundaries and harder truths. I thought about that Burger King coupon sometimes. The last thing they gave me. Cheap, unusable, empty. It summed everything up. I kept it in a drawer. Not because it hurt, but because it reminded me why I'd said goodbye. My success wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Every investment, every earned dollar, was an affirmation of my worth. Every no I said was love directed at myself. A form of care I'd never been given, but finally understood I deserved. The family I built, people who chose me as I chose them, gathered often. We laughed, we helped each other. We showed up without expecting anything in return. It was love without cost. Support without a ledger. I sometimes wondered what might have been if my mother had chosen gratitude, if Trent had chosen to grow. But those thoughts passed quickly. Their choices led them down one path, and mine led me here. The Airbnb business expanded again. Marcus became my property manager. Aunt Patricia's daughter joined as our accountant. We had built something real. Honest. Strong. 10 properties. Then 20. Each one added to a future secured by my own decisions. I was never selfish. I had just been trained to believe I was. The lie that said wanting peace was greed had died. My mother's story became a cautionary tale told to children, a reminder of how love can be twisted into control. She was no longer the center of our family, just a warning of what not to become. Meanwhile, I signed checks for construction projects. The girl who once had her piggy bank raided now built homes for others. Each signature was a victory. I had earned every success.